Hey there, welcome to Glen Talks, where we're sharing inclusive insights and exclusive experiences all around the world of business. I'm your host, Serena Hanschke, and today we have a wonderful guest who is an incredible mentor and support for people in the world of Indigenous business, Brian Paye, who's the president of Brian Paye and Associates. He's one of the most revered mentors for entrepreneurs. Throughout our conversation, we'll be delving into Brian's extensive experience, tapping into his wisdom, and uncovering strategies that have helped propel him to success as he reflects on extensive career that he's had through his years. From navigating challenges to seizing opportunities, Brian's is one that promises to offer invaluable lessons for entrepreneurs and business enthusiasts alike. So without further ado, let's jump and explore the fascinating world and the stories that Brian has to offer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brian.
My pleasure.
How about a little bit of background? I'm so excited to come down and sit down with you today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you to what you're doing today? And then tell us a little bit about what your current role is.
Well, for sure. Thank you. I'll just start. I'll introduce myself in my language. Brian Paye Disnikar. I am Donji Garden River First Nation, Anishinaabe. So my family actually comes from Garden River. That's in Sault Ste. Marie. And I'm Anishinaabe. And over the past 40 plus years, all I've been doing is working with and for our people in different areas, but mostly in the area of economic development. And part of that really has been through my own experiences in working for industry. I've worked as a consultant with large mega projects in the early years. I worked on the North Shore with shipbuilding, where I designed computer systems, even though I failed computer science 3 times at UBC. Designed computer systems for Johnson Terminals after I left there, and then went and worked for the federal government in the first Indigenous equity program. So, and then from there, went and my parents didn't really have any money to retire on. So what I did is I bought a business so that we could all work together. Actually, it turned out to be a bakery. I hadn't even baked anything in my life, and bought a bakery, and we ran that bakery for 11 years. And so all through that process, I was involved with Indigenous boards, helping to, contribute to ensuring that there was monies for our people, both on and off reserve, to get into business. And by equity, I mean government really committing monies to individual businesses or nations so that they could get into business. Because, as you may or may not know, reserve lands you cannot pledge for an asset. It's not owned specifically by the Indigenous person or the nation itself. So it didn't work. And then after I sold the bakery in 2000, I think it was, I thought, well, all this consulting stuff I was doing on the side of my desk, I might as well do directly myself. And from there, I've worked with a few hundred different businesses and nations and communities from British Columbia, Alberta, Northwest Territories, and the Yukon to help our people sort of move forward economically. So that's kind of a bit of my history.
Phenomenal. And I'm sure you've seen the landscape just change in terms of the available services and being able to have access, be able to, as an Indigenous person, be able to grow a business. Like, what kind of hurdles have you seen in the past, and what kind of programs do you see nowadays that are able to help facilitate that?
Well, in the past, probably the biggest issue with regards to starting businesses was access to sort of security, using something as security to get loans from banks. Banks didn't want to touch us as Indigenous people. We didn't have anything to pledge. I got an old truck, I'll pledge that. But if I got a chunk of reserve, I'm living on a chunk of reserve land, I can't pledge that. And so what has changed is, of course, that these equity programs that have been involved, they started way back with the Native Economic Development Program. They moved to something called CADES. They moved to, Aboriginal Business Canada. And now that the monies that are available for equity programs are now sitting with Aboriginal financial institutions, of which there's 4 or 5 in the province of British Columbia. So that's a big change. Mm-hmm. The other thing is access to opportunity, and opportunity that exists, one, because we know how to identify economic opportunities, and two, because now with UNDRIP and DRIPA, and really the government, the federal government, making that law in whatever it was, 2019, no, 2019, yeah, something like that, and really looking at reconciliation as a forefront of recognizing who the original people of Canada were and are.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, when industry wants to do something on the lands, extraction of minerals, extraction of timber, they don't do that without properly consulting and accommodating Indigenous people. So that creates a whole bunch of different opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So that in a nutshell sort of has changed the landscape for how, we can approach business.
Awesome. And do you find that, I guess as a result in the past, you'd probably find that people that were wanting to get into business, having trouble with the access to funds, did you find that people were engaging, I guess, in more riskier types of partnerships or unfair funding strategies with investment groups? Do you have any stories that you can share from that, and maybe why that's kind of helped shape where we're at today and hopefully preventing that type of exploitation that's kind of happened?
Well, yeah, it's interesting you say that because, prior to, I'll say a few years back, the idea of consultation and accommodation from, I won't say all industries, but certain businesses that were there thought that, let's talk to the Indians and we'll make a check on the box and say we did it. And they would record, 5 or 6 calls, and then they would make the argument, well, we've consulted, right? And we've accommodated because we're going to hire a few people. Like that, of course, has changed dramatically. I mean, that was so backwards. So the other thing that's really changed is what do real relationships mean, Indigenous, non-Indigenous relationships? And industry is now realizing, and businesses are realizing, that if they want to do business with Indigenous groups or individuals, the relationship is the number one important thing. Building trust, building a platform where the Indigenous group or the Indigenous entrepreneur feels comfortable and trustworthy. Because remember, if you look back in history, you look back on when the colonialists came and took over, there was no trust. There was trust from the Indigenous side, where we trusted that these people were coming with good intent. But as we know from everything that we've seen, even with the history that has been unfolding in the last 2 years, how much trust and how trust has been breached. So building trust in a business relationship is really critical. And I think that, industry, governments, businesses are becoming a little more respectful of Indigenous people, and building and understanding that those relationships are important.
Not just simply, like you're saying, checking the box and getting just for the fact of being able to get that through, the project through, but it's, I guess, more of a sustainable relationship. And what does that mean in terms of an actual partnership and building that level of trust that's there? Do you have any examples of a partnership that's working quite well right now that you know out there?
Well, there's lots of examples in the province of British Columbia. Okay, so I'll just put a call out for Saskatchewan Development Corporation. They are the development arm of the Takla Nation. Takla Nation has got a very strong chief and council, Chief John French, who's the chief there, and the governance that exists between the chief and council and Saskatchewan Development Corporation, where a board of directors runs that, and they've built incredible inroads into different industries, right from their own manufacturing in the forest sectors, into other areas as well, and are looking to continually to expand and invest even with other Indigenous communities, Indigenous development corporations. So there's a good example, and very successful.
So in your current capacity with your company, like how where do you kind of fall in with helping to build and bridge some of these relationships, and where do you offer your consulting and advice?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's so the Nuu-chah-nulth Economic Development Corporation, which is one of the AFIs, the Aboriginal financial institutions that's on the island, so on the West Coast. So it's owned by the 14 Nuu-chah-nulth tribes of the West Coast. So they've got a conference in the end of February, and that conference is bringing in a keynote speaker by the name of Dr. Manly Begay. Extremely well known in terms of the teachings and the writings over the last 40 years, and really proving that, mixing business with politics, it's like drinking and driving. It'll kill you, as it's been said. So I'm asked to speak on a very simple thing. They said, "Hey, Brian, can you talk on where people find opportunities? How do you identify economic opportunities?" And so that's one of the things that I contribute to, is something like that, where I share some thoughts around what I've learned anyways over the last 45 plus years of how to do that. Other areas where I work, as an example, is in governance, helping communities that have economic structures in place have those structures survive. Because a lot of times, not a lot of times, in some cases, when leadership, and I say chief and council leadership, are directly involved as sort of the directors of board of directors for corporations, it's very difficult to make decisions that are business decisions when you also have to make political decisions. And when you try to mix those two together, it doesn't work. And so the messaging from Dr. Manly Begay is, don't mix politics with business if you want to be successful. So I work in that capacity. And then I help individual entrepreneurs. You wanted to start a daycare, we'd figure out how to do it, what you need to do, what certifications you require, what financing you require, help you figure out how you're going to go about getting your staff in place, like really kind of holding your hand and moving you through the process of how to build the structure of your business so it's going to be successful.
How to be able to access funding, how to build. That's kind of cool. So then, how many people do you work with then at a given time that you have under your wing?
I mean, like how many clients? Right now I've got 4 or 5.
Okay.
But I'm getting of the age now where I'm kind of moving out of that. So, there's a point where younger people will take over, which I'm really happy about. And so right now I just sort of select, who I want to work with and, help where I can.
So talking a little bit about, passing off, moving on and bringing up another generation, can you think about like some mentors that kind of helped you along your path in your career, and who kind of stood out to you, and then and how are you using that to shape your ability to guide and mentor other people?
Yeah, there's a number of mentors. Some of the people that I work with, as an example, at the Native Economic Development Program, David Wacom went on to he got an MBA from Western, I believe, way back when. When we worked together, I mean, we had a close relationship where we could share information, but I think he was an inspiration to me for how he moved forward and with his community and the things that we actually accomplished together. There's his cousin, Don Rasaki. I think he was probably the first Indigenous accountant in British Columbia. I'm not sure for sure, but just a real bright guy, and really stood up for Indigenous rights. Teresa Nahaney, the lady I just mentioned earlier. I mean, she was in the forefront of getting Indigenous people into positions where we could actually make an impact or have an impact on our communities. So there's just a few that I think of.
Just a few.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a big long list.
There's piles of them, actually.
It takes a...
Matt Vickers, I meant one more, my brother Matt.
Yeah,
he's a bit older than me, but what he's accomplished over his years and what he's done. He's been a real inspiration for me. A younger fellow, Chance Gamble from a Cree from Saskatchewan. He says, "Oh, Brian, you're my mentor," but really, there's many things that he has mentored me on, and so the inspiration comes even from my clients, people that I've worked with and watched them and seen how they work within their communities have all inspired me, from elder people to even young children. So.
It's so funny how so many people consider that mentorship is kind of like a one-way relationship, but it's so two-way, because you pick up so much from people that you're mentored from along the way and who you're passing your stuff off to. And I just think back on like some of the experiences that I have, is like you almost walk out feeling so full, just from just a wonderful experience that you get from just the the personal volition of helping people, but also, actually learning maybe a little bit more about technology or, like.
Wow. And that's true. I mean, I'm thinking now, I just want to mention one more. So so one of the things I do in terms of, besides consulting, is I actually run an e-commerce business. And so what I do is I'm going to put a plug in here. So it's www.raingearpro.com.
Mm-hmm.
So my brother, his family actually manufactures that in Salmon Arm, and then I sell online. So I'm the online, I'll say an online distributor. He's got like 124 storefront distributors. But I didn't know much about digital marketing and all that sort of stuff. So I brought on a young guy, Keelan Clark is his name. He's my 49% business partner.
Mm-hmm.
And the young man is 29, going to be 30. But he has got me reading a gazillion types of different, I don't read them, I listen to them, audiobooks that are the most incredible books in terms of just allowing my mind to open. So there's a kid that really has inspired me to begin listening and listening to these books
Mm-hmm.
that are incredible. They really are. And so that's a real inspiration for me, because I sort of lost that way back when.
Yeah, having to pick up a book and read versus being able to have it read to you. Yeah.
Well, just even listening or reading a book, like,
Yeah.
just why, I thought. But it's opened up so many doors and learning for me. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit more about Rain Gear Pro? Where did the idea come from? Can you tell us a little bit more about your products? What's different about Rain Gear Pro from some of the other competitors that you have out in the market? And what's the best way that people can kind of get in touch with your brand and to see it?
Well, I would say that if you really want to see what the brand has to say, I would go on to the Rain Gear Pro Instagram account.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of testimonials, people talking about the gear, and people really saying, wow, this is so different. There's two reasons why it's different. One, it's manufactured in Canada, manufactured in British Columbia. I would say probably the only sort of rain gear and safety pants that are manufactured in Canada, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is manufactured overseas. It could be in China, it could be in Vietnam, it could be anywhere. But we manufacture right here. The second thing is on the rain gear side, we use a material called a high tenacity nylon 66. So if I take a piece of that material and I have it in front of us, and I take a pair of scissors and I cut it, and then I try to rip it, you can't rip it.
Oh, cool.
And yet it's so soft and supple to wear. And then of course it's got the pure polyurethane coating on the inside, and there's sort of a 400 denier, which is the thickness of the material on the outside, double layered with a 210 denier on the inside, with the polyurethane coating face to face. What makes it different? You stay dry. You know how many people I've spoken to that have bought rain gear, very expensive rain gear, and in 2 days it's leaking? And I'm thinking, I'm incredibly excited, because what we do is we bring actual product that makes people want to work out in the environment and stay dry. And
Mm-hmm.
you would know this better than anyone else.
Yeah, usually you have to, when it's a big rainy day, you usually have to have 2 to 3 rain jackets, because within about 3 to 4 hours it starts getting waterlogged and you got to change. And something that actually doesn't leak is phenomenal. So it'd be really cool to see that, and it probably does a lot of really great things for the local community, I bet, too, as well, with having everything manufactured there.
It does. I mean, it certainly employs people within the local community. But to have it both Canadian made, and so my brother sold it to his daughter, so she maintains 51%, so it's Indigenous manufactured. And then I buy it from them. They drop ship it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's Indigenous, sold through raingearpro.com.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because most of our sales right now are into the United States. People look at Instagram. Like this past year, we got a call from Boeing who wanted to buy 450 sets of rain gear. Like that's like $280,000 of product, but we couldn't provide it because we're trying to figure out our manufacturing capacity now that people have found out about us.
Mm-hmm.
it makes good sense to ensure that we can provide the product. But those who've got it, love it.
Amazing. Well, that makes me excited because I will be telling a few more people about this. So having worked with over 250 communities and individual Aboriginal entrepreneurs, can you share a specific success story that reflects resilience and innovation within Indigenous businesses?
Oh yeah, there's quite a few. When I look back on, okay, so are you familiar with Chase, British Columbia?
Yes.
So Quiet Lodge is up there. So when I was sitting on the board, on the Indigenous board, we approved the financing for that. As a consultant, I did the whole study around this 10,000 square foot round convention center that they have there. It's the one thing that didn't burn down this year, by the way, through the fire. So there's an example of a business. There's another one. I'm thinking more of ones you might recognize. Homalco Bear Tours. So they bring tourists down to into Butte Inlet, to the mouth of the Homalco River, and they've got towers. They bring people to look at on these towers, look at the grizzly bears coming down to eat the salmon. That was my project way back when. No one even knows except for the original chief and whoever it was I was working with to get that thing started. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that we've actually got these things going. So there's many, many, many different businesses that we've been part of to get them started. And today I look at the slot of tourism businesses as an example and think, oh my God, like it's such an honor to have said that I played a part in some of the success of those individual businesses.
That's neat, and it gets a whole community kind of rallied behind that. So like just for that as an example, it breathes a whole new different life into tourism, and maybe if it's bear tours for Indigenous tourism, and what that means for, traditionally where you see like the fisheries industry is kind of really been tanked quite a bit, still having access to food fishing, but then now being able to still be with the land and then also be able to promote this beautiful aspect of what people come to Canada for, is to just see the absolutely raw beauty that we have here. It's really, really, really neat.
Well, tourism is, I think from, when you take a look at the history of our people and you take a look at sort of the struggles that we have with, the intergenerational sort of residential school issues. What tourism does, Indigenous tourism, it brings back to our younger people a pride in who they are. It allows them to learn about their culture, to be able to then share that culture. And I mean, it's a very important part to, really helping to revitalize our own cultures. The other reason it's important is because up until COVID, Indigenous tourism was growing probably 2 times faster than just general tourism. Now, are they interrelated or are they external to each other? One builds on the other. So really, if Indigenous tourism is growing that quickly, that means that we can also help Tourism British Columbia to grow at a faster rate as a result of folks wanting to come and see Indigenous product.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Economic empowerment often relies on strong governance. How do you approach governance as a pillar of success for economic resilience? And what challenges have you encountered in promoting this perspective?
Well, that's, earlier I was sharing about Dr. Manley Begay, and he really is one of the pioneers of Indigenous governance and building strong governance to build the foundation from which successful businesses can come. Now, what that means is by strong governance or strong institutions, that's the base of what chief and council are going to build around the community. And what does that mean? It means that there needs to be trust by the citizens of the community in the leadership to know that they are building these foundations. If you haven't got trust with your own people, then of course they fall apart. So building that strong foundation. The second part to governance is that you'll notice that depending on how elections take place in Indigenous communities, they could be 2-year terms, 3-year terms, or 4-year terms. right? Depending on whether they've got traditional systems, the INAC system or whatever. And so the idea of if there's a government in place for 4 years and they've built some sort of governance, that there's some continuity when the baton passes. And I'm not talking like from Obama to Trump, okay? That wasn't smooth. But ensuring that things are not ripped apart when a brand new leadership comes in, that they try to build on what the successful parts of that were. So what I do is help to share some of that. The next part has to do with the governance. You know, there's governance at sort of the government level. And then the other sort of, not choice, but the route that many communities take is they have development corporations that then drive their economic arm. Now, helping leadership understand the importance of setting that up correctly so that there's strong governance in place and that there's not an override of the sort of chief and council over what is happening at the economic level. So ensuring there's an independent board of directors, ensuring that how does reporting get back? So, one of the things that we've done, we meaning there's myself and a couple of other consulting companies have been talking about protocol agreements, something where there's an agreement between the chief and council and sort of the board of directors as to how they're going to communicate, how often, who's got authority to do what. So it kind of works from I'll say a non-traditional way to sort of figuring out how business has to work when you're in a business environment, and really working to help communities understand the importance of that.
Navigating some of the difficulty in the terrain between you dealing with disagreements between hereditary and elected leadership, and then also navigating that with the business side.
Yes.
So how best do you kind of mediate? Do you mediate some of those situations, or it's a difficult situation to be in. It can be at times.
Yes, they are. You touched on a subject which is really, I honestly don't think that it's, first of all, I haven't actually helped to navigate those.
No.
But I do know internally that the struggles that do happen are quite intense. And so who's got authority? Is it the elected leaders or is it the hereditary leaders? How does that work? It would really that'd be actually a really good question for Ian Campbell if you've got him coming next week.
Yeah.
But, because I'm not from the community, I don't help to navigate that.
Yeah.
Like it just is not, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. If I was asked to do a small part, I could to help. If one group wanted to say this and they wanted me to communicate to another group and just share what they said, I could do that. But I think it really internally needs to be worked out within the community. And it may take a number of years to do that.
Yeah, in traditional ways as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So in your extensive career, you've been involved in some mega projects in various sectors. How do you integrate traditional Indigenous wisdom into modern business practices, and what benefits have you observed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. I'll give you an example, but just to talk a little bit about it. So there was an elder out at Seabird Island, and they were raising money for saving the sturgeon. And so the fishing derby, and I might have the months wrong, but you'll understand sort of the concept. And they were going to have the fishing derby in, I'll say June or July or May or something like that. And one of the elders came and said, well, you don't hold the fishing derby then. He says, that's when the sturgeon spawn. Like they spawn at this time. So again, may have the
if you want to save them, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, so don't be catching them at the time when they're trying to spawn, right? But that, they said, well, we've already booked it, we're going to have it, we're going to do it, and they keep doing it on the same time. I can't remember what the date is, but there's traditional knowledge that has been passed down thousands of years that could be shared to help in various aspects of, how do you do certain things in a community? How does one use traditional ways of communicating and putting that into business practice, one of the things I've observed, which is which is really interesting, is in a non-Indigenous group, let's say there's a meeting, and people are talking. And as I observe, I see, oh, that person's right in the middle of speaking. That person is interrupting them and trying to answer their questions, and the other person is interjecting there to say this. There's in the meetings that we generally hold within communities, traditional practices would be don't speak until the other person's finished. That's why you've got sometimes when people are passing around an eagle feather, a talking stick, for good reason, right? To respect the other person as you're moving forward. So bringing to business relationships, that sort of thing, that has been brought forward. And I have brought it forward in meetings where I've said, excuse me, but I think the chief was just speaking. And I don't think you actually gave him the time to finish what he had to say before you were jumping in. So, and at my age, I don't mind saying stuff like that anymore.
Yeah.
So,
and you're now embracing and I guess moving into a bit of an elder stage yourself. So how does that feel? And do you carry that into your practices as well?
I mean, I don't call myself an elder. I guess someone, if they wanted to, they would.
Yeah.
There was a question one time in the big meeting, and there was a bunch of elders hanging around, and so the question went, well, who is an elder here? How do you determine who's an elder? Mm-hmm. And one of the elders put up his hand and says, well, anybody who's taken Viagra is an elder. So I don't, but anyways, I'm making fun of the fact that really it's not anybody that determines who's an elder. It's those that are younger that determine, does this person have wisdom to share?
And I think you're touching on something interesting there too, on the lens of traditional practices in the world of business now today. And I think we hear a little bit more, and I think this is where business is, when you're growing partnerships and you're cultivating these relationships, and sustainable relationships is what the hopes are what you build, and it takes a long time to do this. But any of the decisions that are made, they're being made, and with thought of generations, like a few more from now. Can you explain the 7 generations concept a little bit?
For sure. And I'll also give you an example of sort of your earlier question. So there was a community that had a development corporation that was doing very well. And so they were pretty excited about how well they were doing. And so they put together, there was the annual general meeting. The community was there. They had really nice performance, showed how much money they made for the community and stuff like that. And pretty excited. So the CEO got up there and on a PowerPoint presentation, and he went through all the monies that they've made and different people they employed, and how many individual Indigenous entrepreneurs they'd hired to help with some of that. So finished his presentation, and he says to the community, he says, anybody have any questions? Hand goes up. Goes, yeah, he says, thanks very much, so-and-so. Just wanted one question, though. Wanted to thank you for all that stuff you showed us. But what did you do for our caribou? And shocked him. Goes, didn't know what to say. So that guy sat down. Another guy put up his hand. He says, yeah, it's just thank you, for all that stuff you showed us. But just want to know, like, are we able to save our beavers? And what became evident in the process was that the value, what does business mean? What does success mean in the Indigenous community? And it is leading into your next question, by the way. But the success doesn't mean necessarily how much money is made. Success means, what are we doing to, one, sustain our community, help our community to feel self-worth in their own businesses or through employment, but what are we doing for future generations? And so, 7 generations concept is that, we're borrowing from our children what we're taking today. So if we're taking a bunch of trees down, right, and there's no trees down and 7 generations down the road, then we haven't done our job. And so you'll find that there are communities, Indigenous communities now, that rather than making the money that they could make by, as an example, extraction of timber, they are reducing the annual allowable cut that businesses and companies want to take off the land so that there are trees left for future generations. So the concept of success in the Indigenous community, yes, it's blended with sort of profit for sure, but there's a whole bunch of other things that are more important. That is, you know, if we look at as humans that we are part of the ecosystem, we're part of the circle of life. Circle of life means if you take a look at a circle and there's everything around there, right from the birds, the animals, the trees, the humans, the this and that, and the other thing, we're only one little speck. When we take that and remove something out of that and it breaks the circle, then we break the whole circle of life. It affects everything on our planet. And that's why when you hear, you know, Indigenous people talking about the heartbeat of Mother Earth, when there's drumming, the heartbeat of Mother Earth is, you know, that heartbeat is central to who we are as a people. And then when we ask Indigenous tourism operators, what's the most important part to what you're doing? What is the key? And the answer generally is land. We are the land is us. What we do to the land, we do to ourselves. So that comes full circle back to the 7 generations. What does it mean? It means ensuring that there's a world for our future generations, not taking everything now in terms of the big green buck. Hopefully that helps.
We've got all these different mega projects that are going on. I mean, we've got a big LNG line going in. We've got Trans Mountain. We've got all of these really, really complex projects that are going in, and there's so many strong feelings and opinions on some of these projects. But really what it comes down to at the end of the day, and thinking about the environment, is just making sure that what we're taking from the earth isn't something that's going to be so extensive that it's going to cause, you know, irreversible damage moving forward. And you had told me in the past that you had actually grown up kind of around a little bit in the Kootenay area, I think, as well, right? And the land, you had to move from the land because we were planning to build a hydro project in that area. Like how was that, just knowing that, you know, you're leaving a land that's going to be essentially flooded or going to be irreparably impacted by this big project? So how was that?
Well, I was very young. It was Arrowhead in the Kootenays, and the Arrow Dam went in, and hydro dam, and it got flooded out, and we had to move for sure. You know, how was it? To this day, I mean, I didn't understand what was happening, so I really didn't have a thought back then. But, you know, when you take a look at, you know, where we're at in the province of British Columbia with regards to climate change, and you take a look at what's happened over the last 2 years, water is fires and lack of water, lack of snowpack. I'm worried about this year, how much snow we don't have. You know, what does that do? You know, someone goes, wow, because we don't have water. But I think about it and I go, well, if the Thompson River doesn't have enough water for the fish to swim up, to spawn in the river systems that are connected to the Fraser River all the way up through the Thompson into Adams Lake and all these different areas, we're then destroying the ecosystem. That circle is broken, right? And so, yeah, I mean, climate and climate change and things that are happening in our environment are going to be very impactful. And water, which, you know, when you jump in a shower in Vancouver, you take a shower, you turn your water on, and I don't know, some people take a short shower and some people take a long shower. But if you believe that water is a resource that is so valuable, you'd be jumping in, getting wet, turning it off, soaping down, turning it on, rinsing yourself off, and just not using the water that we need to use, we need to use. So what does that do? Well, it has to start with one person. what does it do? That one person makes a difference in the Capilano Reserve watershed, right? That one person. Now, if you get 5 people, then you get 5,000 people, then you get 500,000 people making a difference. Well, we've got to start treating water as more valuable than gold, because it's the thing that keeps us alive.
That's true. And you're thinking ahead, and man, we're not even thinking 7 months ahead of ourselves, thinking about what's going to be happening in the summer, really.
Exactly.
I mean, truly. And there's so many more responsible ways that we could be using a lot of our resources.
For sure.
Okay. Well, looking ahead, like what initiatives or projects are you working on right now that you're excited about that contribute to the rooted voices in these communities? And how can individuals and organizations support these endeavors?
Yeah. To be honest, I'm, as you asked me earlier, what am I up to? So I'm heading into I'm just south of 69. So I'm kind of tailoring back what I'm doing. So I'm really not directly involved in, sort of some of the larger type questions that you've just asked me about. I've got a few smaller projects that I'm working on, but nothing that is impacting anything globally that's happening in British Columbia or Canada at this point.
Okay. And is there anything, kind of looking back, I guess, if you're kind of thinking about a sunset, I guess, of eventual sunset, what are some of the biggest highlights that you can look back on for projects that you've worked on? What are some of the three biggest highlights of your career so far?
Oh gosh. Could be as small as helping a young lady start her hair salon, to which I did, to working on St. Eugene's Mission down in Cranbrook, which is a large project, employs many people, and it's the whole story around St. Eugene's being a former residential school and what the elders thought. But working on that, there's other projects that I've, Quiet Lodge was one that I mentioned. I've probably worked with 10 of the 14 tribes in the Anishinaabe community. And so, there's so many projects, to be honest. I just think of the individuals that have been impacted, like what it's done for them and created for their families. I was just, there's a young man that I helped buy a fish boat more recently. And so I called him up and I said, hey, can I buy some lingcod from you? He goes, sure. He says, but I'm not going to sell it to you. I'm going to give it to you. So I said, no, I'd rather buy it. But anyways, so he pulls into town a couple of weeks ago, and he pulls up in the gas station in Tawasin. He's got this big truck and he's got these huge coolers on the back. And he goes, what'd you bring to put the fish in? I go, a cooler. He says, looks at it, it's a pretty small cooler. And so he gets up there, he's got a gaff, and pulls out this huge lingcod alive and drops it from the top of his truck down, bounces out of the cooler onto the ground. So I got his squirm around like this.
Pick this guy up, yep.
And but what was really interesting, the reason I tell you the story is because, first of all, he's transporting live fish and he sells them, but he started with one boat. And now he's got a fleet of trucks that he now delivers live product to into Vancouver. He's got 6 or 7 boats that are their resource for how they can sell their product to. He buys that product, brings it out, and sells it. Like that young man is, and he's got a young family, he's got kids, but what he's built, I'm so honored to have been able to help him to get to that point. And so I says, well, the next time I get fish, I got to pay for it. Oh yeah, sure, Brian, whatever.
So you helped enable a guy to fish, and in turn, he gave you a fish.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
You didn't have to teach him how to fish.
Didn't have to teach him. Oh no, he's a good
Nope.
fisherman,
Nope.
but he's a hard worker. Like he goes out in bad weather.
Yeah.
So.
And thinking back to the St. Eugene's mission, I've stayed there a few times, and wow, just what an impactful and emotional experience staying there. Like the grounds are just absolutely breathtakingly beautiful, but the history that you reflect on while you're there, and just like a somber, stoic, and revered place. How was it kind of navigating through the whole planning process of that project? I'm sure there were some strong feelings from some people in the nation, and when having to wrestle and navigate through such a complex issue, and seeing it grow into what it is today. And I think you're talking about being able to go and for people to help embrace some of the history there and to teach people about what had happened.
Yeah. I mean, Chief Sophie Pierre, strong leader from the Tunacha, and was really helped her people navigate through that. Catherine Tenise, people that were involved directly to help to, really reposition the thinking process of how to look at that residential school, and then they had I think Sophie had very strong technicians. I was a technician being involved directly with how do we figure out how to get the financing, how do we make it work, and work with at that time a young guy too, Helder Ponte, who was helping putting together the financing for that. I was working with the government trying to figure out how to get government funding in place for that project. So that was very exciting. I think I'm thinking of another one just as you're asking me earlier. So up in Northwest Territories at the time, when they found Diavik diamonds under the lake, and so started mining. When they first found diamonds, so there were actually two guys out of Kelowna that had discovered them, and the Yellowknife Dene wanted to put a diamond processing plant in place so they could cut diamonds. But De Beers was putting on a lot of heavy pressure, saying, like, we don't cut diamonds in Canada. We cut them in Israel. We cut them in India. We cut them wherever. And the band was, the group was really intent on wanting to create their own processing, cutting facility. So my job was to go up, work with the territorial government to say, hey, give these guys a break, and work with the banks to say, can someone finance this so we can actually move this thing forward? They're not in existence today, but the process of getting there was one where you don't take no for an answer from the government. You just keep pushing and pushing and providing a whole bunch of different reasons why we should do stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's not only for that project, but for many other projects, big projects that have been in the province of British Columbia, where we've had to push and just say, no, we don't agree with you, or use different leverages and political leverages to get what we need to move forward with economic development. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of background on that. So.
And do you find since UNDRIP, at least the declaration to the acceptance of UNDRIP and being able to start applying that, have you found that it's gotten easier, or are you still running into a lot of hurdles?
Well, I think that, there was, 95 different points under UNDRIP of what needed to be met, and DRIPA for the province, they're not even close to meeting those. To be honest, the one of the things that the Prime Minister had mentioned, and I think I mentioned this the last time to you, was that they'd committed to buy 5% of government procurement, which is about 17 or $19 billion a year, from Indigenous business. A lot of it has gone into construction. They've argued that they have, come close, and that's supposed to be the basement amount. But and me trying to sell my rain gear to these guys, to the government, it's been, I'll just say, challenging. Mm-hmm. Very challenging, because it's not the fact that it's Canadian made should make, whether it's Indigenous made doesn't matter. Canadian made. Mm-hmm. If you can buy a Canadian made product, why wouldn't you? Then, if you add an Indigenous component to it that says it's Indigenous manufactured, Indigenous sold, and that meets what the Prime Minister has said, why wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. Versus coming back and saying, the other stuff that we buy, you guys are pretty high, so how about you give us like a 40% discount, we can buy it from you. you're kidding me, right? So
Because we don't exploit our workers and they're not working in sweat shacks.
exactly. So
Mhm.
anyway, so yeah, there are some challenges still, so for sure. But so there's a long way to go with UNDRIP and DRIPA for sure.
We're going to move into a bit of a rapid fire section. So we're going to
Rapid
try
fire.
rapid fire.
Ooh.
So we're going to just throw out some questions, and if you can reply within one word to one sentence, and we'll see how many we can get through. But I'm gonna throw a couple of extra fun ones in here for you. But we'll start out easy on you, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
So one of your most inspiring entrepreneur you've encountered.
Most inspiring? Young guy who runs a cannabis operation in Victoria.
And do they have good prices?
Well, he said yes. He actually manufactures it enclosed.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Favorite traditional Indigenous dish?
Fish, barbecued fish.
What kind is your favorite fish?
Sockeye.
Sockeye. Okay. I'm a halibut girl. One word to describe the essence of Rain Gear Pro.
One word. I'm not so rapid on the thinking part. The best.
Like that. Or dry.
Yeah.
One favorite Indigenous artist or musician. Do you have one?
Oh. Yeah. I'll say Sandy Schofield, Métis artist, who's great.
Okay. Morning routine essential for grounding yourself. What's your go-to?
Exercise every morning.
And favorite type of exercise in the morning?
I do the stairs in Tawasin or I ride the stationary bike.
Oh, fun. Memorable piece of advice from an elder or mentor?
Okay, it was a Jewish elder that said, your people need to learn how to leave money on the table always. Don't take it all.
Cultural tradition you've introduced to your business practices or that you practice?
I practice meditation at sunrise and sunset. Like praying at that time.
And favorite event that you go to attend?
Family gathering at Shuswap.
Shuswap, nice. I love the Shuswap. Ideal location for a retreat?
The Shuswap.
Yeah. Favorite location in BC?
The Shuswap.
Tourism Shuswap.
Yes.
The importance of intergenerational knowledge transfer in communities?
Oh, absolutely critical.
What's one thing you want people to understand about the intersection of Indigenous realities and entrepreneurship? That's a bigger question.
It's not like working for somebody else. You got to be persistent, and persistent.
Your favorite band?
My favorite band?
Music band.
My favorite music band? Oh my God. I mean, at this point, it kind of changes all the time. I mean, it's individual artists, I would say, now.
Yeah.
So I like John Legend. I'll just use John Legend.
Okay. And favorite go-to restaurant for doing business?
Starbucks. So.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. Anything else that you want to share before we sign up?
Well, I just want to thank you. I mean, you're, first of all, a wonderful host and in answering these questions and very gracious. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. No one's ever asked me my thoughts, so I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Brian. No, it's really, really neat getting an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. And I know that we're going to be in a lot of contact over the next while, but
For sure.
It's just been fabulous just learning from you and learning from your experiences. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. I do have, we do have a gift for you. So we've got a couple of things put together that will kind of help send you on your next journey as you move on to your next meetings for today. But we have
Thank you.
wonderful items here, and just for you to piece through.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much.
And we hear you.
Food.
We hear you like to snack, so
Yeah.
we'll leave it all on the table, though.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, you have a great day.
Thanks. That's our show for today. If you like the content that you see, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Share it with your friends and colleagues. We're going to continue to bring you inclusive insights and exclusive experiences. See you next time.